The Diary of a Harlequin is proudly brought to you by Charles Stanley Wealth Managers, official player welfare partner of Harlequins. If you're looking to start your investment journey, then Charles Stanley has lots of tips and ideas on how to secure your financial future. Welcome to the Diary of a Harlequin. I'm your host, Joe Yates-Round, and today we're speaking to Harlequins prop Babalwa Latsha. BB has been at the club for just over a year. And not content with just being a South African international at 15s and 7s, BB also has a degree in law. Since arriving, she's immersed herself fully in life in England, even if she doesn't believe we actually have a summer. BB's not just an incredible player, but also a remarkable activist, using her profile to raise awareness and ultimately shape the lives of the next generation of South African sportsmen and women. Welcome to the Diary of a Harlequin, Babalwa Latsha.
Thank you for having me.
Look, great to be speaking with you today. I think Harlequin supporters know you as the player, and I think love you as the player. I think I can speak for all of them when I say that. But your journey, to use the X Factor cliche, started a long time before we kind of saw you playing here at the Stoop. So I guess almost going back to your early life in South Africa, was being a rugby player something that even entered into your thoughts as something you could do for a career and that would take you around the world? Was that always the vision, or did that sort of come much later?
No, that was never the vision. It came sort of a little bit later in my life. I only started playing rugby when I was 21 years old. Wow. When I did my first year of university at the University of the Western Cape. But prior to that, I had completely different dreams. Rugby wasn't common in my environment. You'd never see it, especially not women playing it. Yeah. So there was no way that I could even sort of dream about it because I had no access to it. But then when I got to university, I discovered, the game of rugby first with sevens. Yeah. And I think what caught me about it was it became a safe space for me. You know, I instantly felt that I belonged, and I was free to express myself. I wasn't weird, or my physicality was embraced, because I was always a big, strong-looking girl, and I just sort of fit right in and perhaps even stood out. Yeah. And I think that's what shaped then the vision to want to pursue it further.
So we'll come back to the fact that you are a South African international playing for Harlequins, but didn't even play rugby really until you were 21 years old. So there's lots of people that will be listening to this going, how on earth it was this talent kind of not kept away and hidden for so long in terms of the rugby pitch? But then let's go back before. You said there were different dreams, different ambitions, different aims when you were growing up. What were those? Let's go back to your childhood. What was that experience like for you in terms of as you reflect back now and how it shaped you?
Well, when I was younger, I wanted to be a lawyer. I've always had this activist spirit within me. I wanted to change the world. Yeah. I wanted to change, my community as it was and still is. One of the biggest and one of the most notorious townships in South Africa, with crime statistics that are ridiculous. It's just not a safe and conducive environment for a young girl to grow up in. But, there's just something about us South Africans, when the odds are stacked against you, that's when you fight even harder and want to sort of excel even harder. And I think that has always been the fire in my heart, in that I wanted to do better than my circumstances. I wanted to sort of break through, type of a thing. And I was really an ambitious child, happy child. I love playing outside and, being dirty or something like that. That's just has always been me.
And do you think that that's something that's a shared ambition to kind of break out or excel and over-excel with you and your peers? Or did that make you stand out a bit when you were that young, ambitious girl growing up in that township? Did people look at you as if to say, no, we're not supposed to go over and above, or you're not supposed to go and do those things? Did that fire you up even more if that happened?
I think we all have ambitions and dreams. and we find ways to pursue those dreams, regardless of your background and circumstances. For some, it may not be a motivator. For some, it is. For me, it was.
Yeah.
And it always has been. I've always, tried my utmost best to be different. By doing that, I realized that it's okay to want to be different.
Yeah.
People don't necessarily have to agree with that. And the rugby environment allowed me to be just that, to be different and want to take a different path. And I feel that rugby has always been that vehicle towards a much more positive trajectory for me and potentially for other young girls growing up in Khayelitsha.
That's interesting. You used a phrase there. It's not just about being different. It's about not being afraid to want to be different. How important is that? I don't know. It's one thing to be different. As you say, you were physically able to play rugby because of who you are, but it's then that want, that desire from you to go, actually, I'm going to grab this opportunity. Is that something that, I don't know, you learn throughout life, or would you say that always it's you have been quite self-assured in that you know what you want and you're going to go and do it? It doesn't matter kind of what the odds say or what other people may say or what the circumstances say.
Honestly, it's something that I'd learned to hone and develop over time. And that was with the help of the people around me. I've had incredible coaches and mentors who saw something in me that I never did, to be honest. And it was me constantly hearing that, BB, you're different.
Yeah.
You're special. You can. And I started believing those things because they came from the right people.
Right.
Then I internalized it and started believing that, in fact, actually, I can and I will. And then that started to spearhead why I wanted to pursue rugby and other things. That ultimately then sort of helps me to be able to plow back again. Because in my view, it's a cycle.
Yeah.
Someone plants a vision, then you start believing in that vision, and then you pursue the vision, and then the very same vision then goes back into someone else or back into the community where you then are able to plant the same or similar vision into somebody else and be like, you can, and you will.
That's amazing. And I think that cyclical nature of it, right? That it's one thing for someone to tell you that, then you internalize it, then you almost view it as your responsibility, but a positive responsibility that you get to go and do this for other people now. You get to kind of plant that seed. Is it about, and you mentioned this just briefly, surrounding yourself with the right people so that the right seeds get planted? Because I imagine for plenty of people in your circumstances, it's easy to be surrounded by the wrong people or just neutral people, right, that aren't able to foster kind of that in you. Did you find that you had to tune out some of the other noise to listen to the right voices before, rugby even came along as you were growing up, wanting to pursue that, that vision of becoming a lawyer, say?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, at home, or at least where I grew up, it's way too easy to fall into the traps that are always there. There's drug abuse, alcohol abuse, violence. And the worst part for me was that I saw my peers fall into the trap. I saw people whom I grew up with, fall into those things. And it's really difficult. But I think the key thing is to keep the hope alive. There's always hope for something better. And fortunately for me, my family was really important in playing the role of me never falling into a state of hopelessness where I just give up on myself and my future. Which is why I took it upon myself, or took the responsibility, the great responsibility upon myself to be a positive point of reference for young people in my community, that actually there is a different path. If Babalwa or Bibi, who looks like me, who comes from similar or in fact identical circumstances as me, can be able to be someone, can be able to take a different path, then why can't I? You know, and so I think that has then become so important for me.
Yeah. And do you think there's, to hear you talk about it, and I'd sit here in an immensely privileged position, that sounds like a lot of pressure that you're putting on your shoulders. Did it ever feel like pressure, or because it was a choice and something you wanted to do, you talked about that great responsibility. Is that different to maybe a pressure to be the person that breaks through, rather than, I don't know, taking the responsibility of saying, I want to be different, I want to be the person that breaks through because of what this can mean for others?
No, it's not pressure at all. In my view, I don't see it as pressure. I see it as a privilege. I see it almost as an honor, because I feel that, of course, I'm not the only one, but it takes a different type of individual who just cannot sit back and watch, you know, who wants to stand up and champion something different.
Yeah.
You know, so it's never pressure for me. It has always been that privilege to be in that type of a position in the first place.
And so before rugby, you said you always had that activist in you. You still do have that activist in you. So before rugby came into the picture, onto the scene, and you were kind of looking at university and education and law being the route that you wanted to take, how did that start to shape itself, I guess, from those early days through school? When did you kind of think this is the route that is the right route for me at the moment to do that, to sow those seeds?
You know, I think I've always been agitated by things that aren't quite right. I've always been agitated by injustice.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to be like, no, this should change. Or I want to change this. I think that's as early as I can remember. That was probably what sort of informed my decision to want to pursue a law degree. At the time, perhaps I may have been a little bit naive in thinking that me being a lawyer, I'll be it's a noble profession, I'll be the champion of justice, I'll change policy, I'll change the world, I'll change all the rules. I quickly learned that it's not that simple, but of course it's a great qualification to have, which in the nearest future will be put to better use.
I was going to say, what is there crossover between your law degree and rugby? Obviously, rugby entered into your life at that sort of point. You were doing that degree. Were there things you were taking from one into the other, or was rugby the physical outlet after finding out that becoming a lawyer didn't mean you could just change all the change all the laws and make the world a better place?
No, I actually think that there are synergies. And a law degree is very vast and broad. There are so many uses for it within the sports space and beyond. So I'm actually quite excited to see what my career will look like post rugby, even pre, in terms of how, I'm able to sort of align, those two worlds, because as different as they may seem, they are quite similar.
And I think what's interesting is you're approaching this from a place of, I don't know, maybe different to some of the other guests that we've had on this podcast, some other rugby players that people may know, because becoming a rugby player was not the goal that you woke up with at age 5, 6, 7 years old of, going, this is what I'm going to do, but I need to think of a career outside of rugby that will sustain me. You approached it from, well, I want a career, I've got my mission, my values, I know what impact I want to leave on the world. And then rugby comes along when you're 21. So actually, I don't know, it's less, you said it's not about life after rugby, it's life before rugby, life during rugby. But then rugby does come along, right? So 21, you're playing rugby, you feel this safe space, as you said. Tell me more about that discovery at university of this sport and the game and kind of what it's meant to you.
Gosh, it's been probably the best thing to happen for me to discover rugby. Perhaps even at that age, because then it's quite a critical age for any young woman in my opinion at least. You know, the ages of 21 where you're finding yourself, you're finding your voice, and you're discovering things about yourself and how you relate to everybody else in the rest of the world. So I was really fortunate to then find a sport that influenced all of those things positively, that influenced how I viewed the world, that opened my heart and my mind to people and their differences and, you know, the way in which perhaps the world functions, you know, and where I find my space and my place and voice within that world. And so I honestly don't wish that I had come across the sport any younger. I feel that everything aligned perfectly for me, at least that is how I see it. You know, I honestly don't even sit and wonder what type of trajectory my career would have taken had I started earlier. I'm a firm believer in that everything happens for a reason. You know, so I'm really grateful that I found, the sport of rugby found me, molded me and the way that I am able to interact with others, you know, and the skills, life skills actually, that I've learned and developed, you know, within that space. So honestly, I'm grateful that I've had so many great opportunities thus far.
And so you discover the game of rugby at university, you're then playing. I imagine you're then playing with a group of young women that are all at different levels in terms of rugby ability. I guess for you it wasn't necessarily something that you saw, but there may have been kind of girls and young women playing that were actually at quite a high level. How did you find that sort of introduction to the game, where suddenly you're trying to learn the laws of the game, right, as well as doing a degree, as well as, you know, the social life that is at university? Was that a lot to take on, or was the aspect of learning something new also what appealed with rugby?
I just learned so many things very quickly, because it didn't really take me long to get into a provincial team. Then all of a sudden I'm in a national team. Then all of a sudden I'm captaining a national team. Then the next thing, I'm the first woman in Africa to play professional rugby. Next thing, I'm here in England playing for, you know, in my opinion, at least one of the best clubs in the league. So, excuse me, everything happened very quickly for me. So it took a lot of adjusting, a lot of learning. The pace of that learning was crazy. Sometimes it was frustratingly slow. Sometimes it was impressively quick. You know, like you said, I was with other women who had been playing longer, who, you know, were much more versed in the sport than I was. I was just this extremely physical thing, you know. I remember that's one girl called me, like, "You just this thing that we don't know what to do. You're just strong, and we love it. We're glad you're on our side and not the opposition." And, you know, just things like that. Really, that's when you sort of understand that, hey, maybe I am on the right path. Especially when things just start falling into place. You know, and surprisingly for me, I was like, how did that even happen? But then again, I sort of understand that, you know what, maybe I am on the right track. You know, maybe I am doing the right thing. Maybe that is why it's happening so rapidly.
Yes, and that's, I guess, part of it, isn't it? It's happening fast, but also you had the ability and the aptitude to allow it to happen fast, as in you applied yourself. Like, these opportunities may well have been there, and if you weren't in the position to take them, then they would have passed you by, because that's what happens with other people. Was there any animosity or challenge from some of the other women that you were playing with, that you rock up at university and then, as you say, then suddenly you are playing for a provincial team, national team, playing for your country, playing professional rugby? Were there women going, hang on, we've spent years and years trying to get to this level, and BB's rocked up and is just already the best? You're too humble to actually answer that truthfully, but go on, tell me, was there ever a little bit of tension?
Not that I was ever aware of. To be honest, if they were, then it went way over my head. So I honestly don't know. I've only ever had the privilege to be surrounded by people who always cheered me on, who's always been, or at least appeared to be happy when I did well.
Yeah.
Especially from my mentor, Advocate Lwazi Mzozoya, and I think he played a very, very important role in the earliest days of my career. So if ever there were such, gosh, I probably never paid attention to it.
It's interesting you kind of mentioned your mentor there. You've talked about the voices that you surround yourself with. How conscious are you about selecting those people? Maybe your mentor as a prime example there. Like, how did he come into your life, and how did that sort of process evolve and help you as you were navigating this kind of rapid rise in rugby and in life?
Well, I think that again, like I said earlier, it's too easy to listen to the wrong voices. That's the easy part. The most difficult thing is to listen to the right voices, because sometimes the right voices won't necessarily tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
They won't tell you what is comfortable. How I knew or somewhat figured out that those were the right voices is when they told me uncomfortable truths, perhaps about myself and what I was doing. And also, there's just something in your heart when you know that you're not quite doing the right thing. Yeah. It's always in there, deep inside. And no one else can quiet that except you, and no one else hears it except you. So also to be in tune with your path and what you feel and think is the right thing, helps. It helps really, really a lot. It helps a lot.
And so we then go through that rapid rise, as you said. Now, you made it all sound very straightforward, the provincial team, national team, international team, professional rugby, and here you are at Harlequins. But I imagine there were some more ups and downs than that. So how does that, so you're playing rugby at university, how does that provincial team, how does that kind of present itself to you? How does that opportunity exist in your world?
Well, practically it was me rocking up at trials at Western Province where I played. Went for trials as a flanker. Got selected, and then I was converted to a loose head prop first, which, to be honest, I had no idea what it was or what I was doing. All I knew was that I was strong and I could run. I could run into people. And then again, another learning sort of process took place. But in all honesty, when I reflect, it really wasn't that simple, because now I'd found myself in a space that at the time traditionally was known to be for boys. Men play rugby. It's a masculine sport. It's a rough sport. Some even view it to be a sport that no woman should play. Right. And I had then to sort of fight through that, in that I had to be present. I had to sort of take up space to say that, hey, actually, no, girls can play rugby, girls should play rugby. And here I am in all of my physical, not glory, but physicality, being as strong, as muscular, and perhaps even as vocal about it, that, so it was more of breaking through those types of stereotypes. And you'd be surprised that to this day, I still deal with, especially on social media, people commenting on my physique, questioning my gender, saying all types of nasty things about my appearance. So with that, then, I think the shield for me from all of those negative comments is loving myself just the way that I am. I don't wish to change anything about the way that I look. I love that I'm muscular. I love that, I've got broad shoulders, that I'm strong, that I'm tall, that, I have this incredible ability to put my body through what some may consider the worst on the rugby field and still come out unscathed on the other side, and feeling good about that.
Yeah.
So in as much as things happen quite quickly, psychologically and emotionally, I'd had to also develop a fortress in saying that you can't shake my self-esteem. You can't shake my self-confidence, self-worth, how I view myself and how much I love myself.
Bibi, you have a remarkable amount of grace in terms of the way that you talk about it, the way that you hold yourself, and even articulating, as you say, even still now, the comments you may receive on social media, what people say. I imagine back then it was much sharper and much more direct, rather than people hiding behind their keyboards or their phone screens or whatever. But it's the exact same prejudices that you're encountering. Where does that self-love or self-acceptance come from? Is that something, again, that you've worked on and nurtured, and comes from having the right people around you, but also listening and knowing your own truth? I guess there may be people listening that maybe are struggling with that sort of thing. I don't know if there's any advice or something that's worked for you that maybe you could share.
Honestly, I've I've grown to discover that nobody can do you like you can do you. Ever. We all beautifully unique and created in a way that is so divine and so different that nobody else can replicate that. So I discovered that and internalized it as well, that, hey, actually, there is no other Bibi at all. So why should I be my worst enemy? Why should I then not embrace that and love myself even more for that?
Yeah.
How incredible is it? Imagine, like, there literally is no other person that is you, that is able to do things the way you do it, speak like you, dress like you, walk. They can try, but they will never be you, So there's just something beautiful about that. And I think the penny dropped for me when I realized it and embraced it. And I was like, hey, this is incredible. And I think that individualism is what makes collectives then even more special and even more powerful, because, we are these incredible individuals. But once we bring that together, we're able to make so many changes, positive changes in our communities, even in our sports clubs and so forth.
Oh, my word. I'm taking you with me everywhere I go. Can you do my morning affirmations for me? There'll be lots of people requesting that Bibi is their new internal monologue. But wow, I mean, you talk about that individuality making the collective. I wonder, is that something that really appealed about rugby specifically as a sport? Like, obviously, as you say, you are tall, you are muscular, like sports will have come much more easily to you than me, just the way that I'm made. But that appeal of a rugby team, that you need all the different shapes and sizes to make the team. It doesn't work if you had 15 people built like Bibi. It wouldn't work if you had 15 people built like Eddie Kildun. You need that collective. Did that appeal to you when you kind of discovered this sport?
Yes, it's a very resounding yes. That's the beauty of rugby. Like, every shape, form, and size has a place in rugby. And I think that, rugby is one of the best sports in the world because everyone is welcome. It doesn't discriminate against anyone based on any ground. You can be big, short, tall. You will find a space in rugby. And the turning point for me was when I found that space. When I found that niche, a safe space, like I put, to be able to express myself without any bounds, without any limitations, because that is what the sport is, and that's what it does. We do need an Ellie Kildun, but you equally need a Bibi, and then when you put that together, the family and lifelong friends and the camaraderie and almost sisters that you find
Yeah.
in that space. Those relationships you're able to have, for a lifetime. And that for me is something truly, truly special.
And so you've gone onto the provincial team, national team comes knocking at your door next because you're just ripping up trees, right? You're taking up so much, as you say, you're constantly taking up so much space. You're like, I'm here, get used to it. What was that like then suddenly when you're playing at a national level and then your country are kind of looking at you and going, yes, we want you to be a part of our international setup? Was there an immense feeling of pride, I imagine, but was there more than that in terms of the next stage of that responsibility that afforded you to reflect back to your local community?
Honestly, it was the biggest honors really to be selected to represent your country, because how I saw it was that it was not just me wearing the Springboks or the green and gold, but it was me or us representing our families, our communities, the people who believed in us, all the hard work paying off, literally every single South African, which was something extremely special. It still is, and it always will be.
Yeah.
But if I'm being brutally honest, on the flip side of it, because I was so young at the time, I sort of felt a sense of arrivement. I felt that, oh gosh, I've now reached the pinnacle. And then it sort of dawned on me again later, a little bit later, that actually I haven't arrived anywhere. I haven't done anything until I can be able to be a positive influence in someone else's life, in another young girl's life, which then sort of grew into that great responsibility, but not a responsibility, in saying that I'm now a Springbok. That then gives me a platform to be a positive point of reference, and to get myself into spaces where I'm able to plow back, where I'm able to be part of, incredible foundations that do great work. I'm able to be, a Laureus ambassador that changes the world literally, and that does work globally. So it initially it was pride, yes, I've done it. Then it gradually evolved into a place where it's a privilege that opens up doors to platforms where I'm then again able to plow back. That's the core of it, to always be in a position to be able to plow back to my community, to be able to inspire the next generation, perhaps a brand new generation of young women who themselves are able to recognize that there are different pathways to what they currently see in their backgrounds and in their environments.
Wow. Oh, again, I'm just I have follow-up questions, but every time you finish an answer, I just sort of want to do a round of applause, but that doesn't really work on an audio format. So you play for South Africa, and then I guess talk to me about how Harlequins enters the picture for you, because for someone who 10 years ago wasn't even playing rugby to now suddenly be playing for your country, and the prospect of playing that sport in another country for, as you said it, one of the top clubs in Europe and in the world. Like, how does that opportunity present itself to you?
Well, I would imagine that it came post World Cup. Again, I've had a massive privilege to compete and represent my country in the biggest stages of all rugby stages, really. For the second time, first sevens and then 15s. I think that the Harlequins came into contact after that. I would like to think that's where they saw or discovered me, in inverted commas.
Yeah, that was your shop window, the World Cup.
I'd like to think so, yes. And so the club made contact. They were interested in having me over. And I was honestly ecstatic because off of the back of me playing professional rugby for the first time in Spain, I sort of wanted to elevate. I wanted to take my career to the next level. And here was the best, next best thing to do. And so when that opportunity came, I grabbed it with both hands for the first time last season for a period of about 4 months. And in that period, my rugby just started growing and growing. I became a better rugby player. The learning process started happening again. And beyond that, I was in an environment or in a club where, you could be yourself.
Yeah. That individuality.
Yes,
again.
You could be yourself. You could, embrace what you were capable of. And, you come across people, incredible people who are willing to help you out without a doubt. And I've made so many, friends, made some special relationships, and sort of fallen in love with the club, to be honest. And I think that was why I wanted to come back so badly for a full season. And when that prospect was put to me, it was a no-brainer for me to want to come back here. Like I said in some other interview, that I genuinely love this club. I love what we're about. I love what we represent. And I love the type of connections that we are able to make within the rugby community and even beyond that.
And so with Harlequin, your love for the club is evident, and I think the supporters certainly love having you as part of it, as I'm sure your teammates do as well. But what was that culture shift like, coming from the background that you described, starting rugby so late, to then suddenly coming and playing at an English Premier 15s club where there's girls and women playing that have come through elite development pathways that have had that dream of wanting to be a rugby player their whole life? Like, we've talked about that individuality, but was there a bit of a culture shock? One, moving from South Africa to the United Kingdom, but then in terms of the rugby side of it as well, going from a certain environment to a very different environment.
Yes, I think from a purely rugby perspective, I felt that, I still do, that, the rugby here is very competitive. It's fast, it's entertaining, it's electrifying. You almost easily become addicted to it. And that was what I liked about it, because then it challenged me to step up, to keep up, and to take a step up into what I perceived as professionalism.
Right. Yeah.
Because this is the pinnacle of it. What I thought was it had a bit of holes in it, which I got the opportunity to fill here and to understand that better. But it's still a learning process for me. It always is, to be in new environments or relatively new environments, to learn new things on a daily, and to be in an environment again where it's fully, well, for the most part, professional, and you get to do this every single day. But from a little bit more general perspective, gosh, the first thing that got me was the weather. It's just so different. It's extremely cold and wet and gloomy. In contrast to South Africa, it's sunny, it's warm, the beaches are amazing, the people are always smiling and happy. But it's just it comes with the territory. You just embrace it, and you accept it, and you just move on with your life and what you need to do. Any
English or British traditions you've picked up? It's cold, gloomy, as you say, but surely that makes room for a Sunday roast or an apple crumble, right?
I was about to say that Sunday roast is a thing here. It's a real thing. I've had one or two. I've had one or two which I enjoyed. But of course, nothing beats like a braai on a Saturday, you know. But yeah, it's just, it's great, man. It's amazing. It's amazing.
I almost want to say agree to disagree, but I do think that a good braai does beat a Sunday roast. I don't even know if that's a particularly hot take. It's just really good.
Just take my word for it.
So look, we've got onto food there. I guess this is a consistent theme when speaking to rugby players, that one of your passions is pretty consistently food, and what you all like to eat. But what other kind of passions do you have, or extravagances, like outside of rugby, outside of sport? What are the other things that kind of keep you interested, or kind of pique your interest?
Well, my favorite thing to do outside of rugby is to be involved in community work. May not be so much of an extravagancy, but it's a passion.
Yeah,
I'm one of the directors of the Menstruation Foundation. So what we do is literally in the name.
Yeah.
we fight period poverty by providing sanitary products to young girls in schools, sports hubs, everywhere where there are women.
Yeah,
we will provide sanitary products. So we discovered that even from personal experience, that period poverty is a serious problem, perhaps even globally. It makes no sense to me. How in the world should something that happens naturally to you be the one thing that keeps you away from school, away from, doing some of your favorite things, away from sport and things like that? So again, it was an injustice that agitated me, and I wanted to do something about that. So that is essentially what we do. Our aim is to, in the next few years, is to have sanitary products completely free in South Africa. But that's a fight that we are steadily championing and heading towards, that direction. Like I may have mentioned, I'm one of the ambassadors of the Laureus, which too uses sport as a tool to affect positive changes in various communities throughout the world. I've had the privilege to work with my good friend Beast Tendai, with his foundation as well. That does amazing work in terms of creating opportunities for young people through education and sport as well. So I'm just demonstrating that it's a big passion for me to want to get stuck in communities, because the thing is, I know what it's like. I've lived that experience, and I don't want it for the next person, or at least I want to try to make it easier, But outside of that, I'm just a simple, easygoing, woman. I love watches. That would be an extravagancy.
Watches.
I just love timepieces.
Yeah.
Buying watches, and quite expensive, I have to be honest. But I just love watches. And
how do you plan those? Are those purchases that are you saving up? Are you saving up for something at the moment, or do you just go, you see it and you go, I need it?
Well, honestly, it depends. It depends. If I see it, I want it, and I'm good for it financially, I take it.
You're going for it.
I go for it. Perhaps not the wisest way to go about making purchases, admittedly, but it's just me.
I feel like I've accidentally jumped onto the slightly more trivial answer there that you gave in terms of your passions. Just know that we've had other people literally say food and trainers, and you've talked through your incredible charity work. I wonder, is that something that you talked about, this life before, during and after rugby that you're currently living? Would you say that's something you want to leave behind? The rugby is important, but it gives you the platform to be able to fight for the Menstruation Foundation, Laureus, the other foundations that you're involved in?
If I'm being really honest, I think a playing career is relatively short. Players come and go in rugby, in any sport.
Yeah.
But I think for me, the most important thing is what you leave behind while you're in that position.
Yeah.
So for me, it's more of a legacy. My thing is, when I leave this club, in fact, when I leave rugby altogether, what will BB be remembered for? What will stick in people's hearts more than minds?
Yeah.
So for me, it's more of leaving a legacy, a positive legacy. It's about breaking new ground and opening new doors for others. It's literally planting trees for shade that you won't get to enjoy because you know what it's like to not have that shade.
Yeah.
And so in all honesty, that is what I would like to be remembered for the type of legacy that I left, the people's lives that I was able to touch in one way or another, the positive ways in which I was able to make people feel.
Yeah.
Because I think that's how or where one is truly, truly able to change the world, to change communities, to change the way that perhaps individuals see themselves. So I think for me, that's literally it. I want in every space where I am in to be able to leave that space in a better place than it was before.
And I've got a final question, but you've answered it far better than I could have ever asked it. And I think to sum it up was something that you said, not as a throwaway, but incredibly profound, that you're planting trees for shade that you know you won't get to enjoy. No pressure, right? But it seems like throughout our whole conversation, BB, that you've not once talked about pressure. I've talked about pressure, and you've talked about responsibility and how much you enjoy that. And whatever you choose to do after rugby, long after rugby, I'm sure you'll be an incredible success. I just wanted to say thank you for spending the time talking to us today, and I'm sure we've all taken something away from this conversation. Babalwa Latsha, thank you for being on the Diary of a Harlequin.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.